Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Beck, Director of Programs and Education at the American Public Gardens Association. I will be your staff representative during this virtual conference session. Before we begin, here are a couple of tips to get the most out of your virtual conference experience. First, if you are experiencing poor video quality or audio quality, we suggest closing other programs on your computer, especially other browser tabs. Your inbox will still be there at the end of the session, I promise. If you have any other problems or questions, association staff are available to help. Give us a call at 610-708-3010 or send us an email at info@publicgardens.org. Second, while this session has been pre-recorded, the presenters are here with us today as panelists and will be happy to take your questions in the live question and answer portions of the session. At some point during this session, the presenters may activate a poll. Poll responses are anonymous, so be sure to let us know how you really feel. Finally, you can submit your questions using Zoom's Q&A function that you will find in your Zoom toolbar. Questions can be submitted anonymously. You can also upvote other questions to indicate you would like to hear them answered. We will try to answer as many questions as we can during the live Q&A portion of this session. Some questions may be answered directly through the Q&A feature. Thank you, and enjoy today's session.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Rader. I'm president of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society in Philadelphia, and I welcome you to the session on managing significant leadership transitions. Our focus today is learning from three relatively new leaders of public gardens and arboreta here in Greater Philadelphia, a bit about their experience taking on a new leadership role in a public garden. So before we start, I wanted to give each of our three panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and their institution a little bit. So first up, I'm going to ask Mandy Santiago from Tyler Arboretum to introduce herself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me today. I'm Mandy. I've been with Tyler Arboretum just over a year now, and this is my first time serving as an executive director in the world of public horticulture. So it's been quite fascinating.
It's great. Mandy, about how big is Tyler, and is there one or two really special things that you would call out for the group to know?
Wow, just only two. Okay, so Tyler encompasses 650 acres, and I would say the two things that we're probably pretty well known for are the rhododendron collections by Dr. Wister and our state champion trees, being two of which are my favorite, the giant sequoia and the cedar of Lebanon.
Fantastic, thank you. And Tom Smar from Jenkins Arboretum.
Yeah, Tom Smar. This is my first executive director position, but I've worked in public horticulture and for many years, and sort of as a horticulture leader in many different institutions, and came to Jenkins almost a year ago, of June a year ago. I started the week of, I moved to the week of the last conference. So that was sort of fun to try to move and try to attend a conference at the same time. And Jenkins Arboretum is a small, probably lesser known of the Philadelphia gardens. It's about a 15-acre garden open to the public. And then we have about another 36 acres. It's on a hillside in the near King of Prussia, so just a little northwest of Philadelphia. And we're significantly a rhododendron and azalea collection as well, similar to what Tyler has within their larger collections. But we're also very much a naturalistic style garden.
Fantastic. And Bill Kalina from Morris Arboretum.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yep, I'm officially the F. Autopass Director of the Morris Arboretum at the University of Pennsylvania. Very difficult to fit on a business card, but I've been at the Morris now just under a year. Started just about the same time as these guys did. Before that, for the past 8 years before that, I was the CEO at Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens in Boothby, Maine. Morris Arboretum, if you've never been to us, we're within the city of Philadelphia and Chestnut Hill area. The Arboretum was founded in 1887 by John and Lydia Morris as their private country estate. And they built a great collection of Asian plants and planted all kinds of different trees and built this beautiful sort of pastoral Victorian landscape there. And then in the 1930s, it was given to the University of Pennsylvania to basically carry out botanical research and continue with education and planting and curation. The Morris Arboretum, I think it's what's special about it. It's a collection of trees. Certainly, we've got some ancient specimens. It's a beautiful kind of romantic Victorian landscape with fountains and walled gardens and that sort of thing, and all that within the city limits of Philadelphia. Our annual budget is about $8.5 million. We have 140,000 more or less visitors. There is 65 full-time equivalent staff.
Thank you, Bill. And Mandy and Tom, could you touch on budget size, staff size, and visitation, just to give a sense of the scale of the organization?
Sure. For Tyler, we have an operating budget of just under $2 million, and what I consider a really hardcore but small crew of 26 employees and 250 volunteers. So we get a lot done for the amount of acreage that we have to cover.
And at Jenkins, we started about 40 years ago, so we're not that old of a garden. It was a land gift by a founder, but there was no garden here before that. So a lot of the garden was built in those last 40 years. Currently, our staff is it vacillates between 13 to 15, depending on with interns. And we have a fellow program, 2 fellows each year. And our operating budget hits right at about $1 million to operate. And we see there hadn't really been measurement for visitorship in the past, so we started doing that when I arrived here. And we're estimating right now we see about 70,000 people a year, or 70,000 visits a year, I should say.
Fantastic. So the reason the 4 of us wanted to invest the time to produce this session is that we believe very strongly in the importance of strong leaders for public gardens and arboreta, and also the responsibility of all of us as leaders to help cultivate the next group of great leaders to join us and work with us and eventually replace us. So we wanted to focus specifically on leadership transitions, which can really be kind of make or break time, both for a leader and for an institution. These are times of great importance and great fragility. The entire continuity of the institution is under some level of threat. Anxiety is high among the board, the staff, and the new leader, and expectations are equally high. And the data tells us that done poorly, leadership transitions really have a negative impact. Can lead to 20% lower staff engagement, 15% lower productivity, and a lot of them fail. Something like 1/3 of leadership transitions outright fail, with cultural issues and internal politics being important drivers of that. Leaders also approach transition in really different ways. So from how you explore the job before starting to how you start varies a lot, and I think we're going to push on that today. 69% of new leaders reshuffle their management teams in the first 2 years, and 2/3 say they wish they had implemented change even faster. 80% say that implementing culture change is difficult, and 75% feel that they get little support in the transition process. So obviously there's room to do better, and there's also ways to learn what works and what doesn't work. And as we look at the public horticulture field in general and know that we need to really actively cultivate and have new leaders be successful to keep the gardens and arboreta and institutions alive and healthy and impactful, we as a field need to do a really good job recruiting, empowering, supporting, and making successful a lot of new leaders. And so we consider this a contribution to try to share our knowledge and experience with 3 leaders who have started all in long-established institutions, all here in the greater Philadelphia region. And we want to learn from them about how to do this well, and also lessons learned to help make it go better. So first, we're going to start with three questions, and each of you take a minute or two to answer this question and share your thoughts. So the first one up is for Bill. And the question is, Bill, how did you approach getting to know the organization and the staff? And how did this information help you shape your approach to leading the organization?
Well, I had been through a leadership transition on the staff side before, and I came to realize that they don't always go well, as you said, Matt. I think it's really hard for staff going through this change, especially after long-term leadership. I mean, it's a real shock to the system, and the reality is that most of the time the staff is not that highly involved, I think, in search and that sort of thing too. So I wanted to really have a pretty clear onboarding plan and schedule to get to meet everybody. So I worked with my to-be assistant in the month before I started to schedule a set of meetings with the staff. It started out my first day with a meeting in my senior team, and then just sort of an all-staff picnic, sort of informal, and just a chance for people to just see my face and at least, kind of get a read on me that way. And then after that, I had detailed 2 or 3 hour one-on-one meetings with each one of my direct reports, department heads, where we just talked in detail about the structure of their department and budget and issues and things they were going to have. And that basically took the first week. And then I'm a little different than a lot of public garden leaders in that I don't report to a board of directors. I report to a supervisor at the University of Pennsylvania. So meeting the team there was really important too. I had to spend time meeting my colleagues, my supervisor and staff there. And then after that, what I did is organize roundtables for the different departments, so education, horticulture, visitor experience, finance, et cetera, where all the staff were invited to come, even the part-time folks, the interns, and just really a chance for them to meet me, ask me questions, and for me to learn and listen to them and hear about what they thought was important issues that might come up. And I think that was all really important to me as I just learned about the cultural organization, because those first impressions really mean a lot. And a lot of the things that I picked up in that first couple of weeks, I really took with me as I moved through the first year and remembered. And the feedback I got from the staff was overwhelmingly positive. People, I think, were understandably nervous about who I was and kind of getting to know me. And it's just a chance of just being welcoming like that and allowing them a chance to voice anything that was on their mind. I think they really appreciated.
Was there anything you learned in that journey that really changed how you approached leading this organization?
Well, one of the things that was interesting to me, because I hadn't met any of the staff, albeit one who was on the search committee, is that not only was the former director there for a long time, about 40 years, but a lot of the staff has been with the organization for a long time too. We have many people that have been with us 10, 15, 20, even 30, 35 years. And so they bring a lot of experience, but also, I think the sort of fear of change is very real there for those folks.
Thank you. All right. And for everyone listening, we are eager to answer live questions that are top of mind for you. So if you have questions you'd like us to address, please put them in the chat box, and then we will come to them later in the session. So please do that. So now turning to Mandy at Tyler Arboretum. So Mandy, how did your past experiences outside of the public horticulture world shape your approach to your transition and also help shape your first year priorities as you got started?
Well, I would say I was very fortunate here at Tyler that both the board and the staff were, from the beginning, willing to give me at least a 1-year runway where I could observe Tyler in all its events and seasons, so that I had a clear understanding of what the organization was about, so that I could see the culture for myself and then start to make some decisions around what might happen next. For me, one of the greatest things that came from becoming an executive director was bringing the for-profit mindset to the nonprofit world. At first, it was a little tricky because I come from higher ed and healthcare sector, which are not exactly known for being collaborative, and have much bigger budgets than we are used to here at Tyler. So for me, being able to scan the infrastructure and realize what were our technology needs, what were our staffing needs, and how do you reframe the question that I think some staff struggled with, that a nonprofit couldn't make a profit. Even saying the word profit was an issue. And so I had to quickly self-correct and say revenue generation to soften that a bit. And I think some people have now come around to why that's important. Even before COVID, just being able to have the flexibility and the cushion financially to implement new programs, to replace things that might break down at the most unexpected and inconvenient time. But certainly now in the face of COVID-19, to figure out how you stay afloat under such challenging circumstances. It means beefing up your endowment. It means talking to your major donors about transformational gifts. And while we were very fortunate that we have a very dedicated membership base, going beyond that, how do we reach new members and new audiences? So all of those things kind of came barreling down at Tyler at once, but I think for the past year we've gone as slowly as we can, but now it's really been forced upon us to think differently and act more like a business as opposed to the nonprofit culture that we've had here.
You described using the first year to sort of observe and learn and see the cycle and start to make change. How did you set those first year priorities?
So I cheated a little bit. I ordered the book called The Executive Director's Guide by Mim Carlson. That was my mandatory reading before I started. And in my own mind, mapping out what I felt were the organization's priorities, but keeping that to myself so that I had input from staff, board, and volunteers to see where there was alignment. I think if I had come in making a ton of changes all at once, there would have been more backlash. And that's what I was trying to avoid. I really wanted to keep an open mind as to how do we accomplish this task of making sure our programs and services are mission aligned and are reaching the intended audience, but also how do we make them more fruitful for the organization? How do we generate more revenue? So those are difficult conversations to have in your first 3 months. So I waited till month 11. And then I rolled out what my version of an operations plan looked like based on the feedback that I received from the team. And from there, we had some discussions similar to what you would for a strategic plan to figure out what we agree on, where we have some level of disagreement, but how do we navigate moving forward?
Thank you very much. So Tom, at Jenkins, what did the board, staff, and others do to help you ensure a successful transition? And how have you and your board tracked the success of that transition?
Early on, before I got hired, I think it's probably true of many of us, there was a little bit of a discussion, and in my offer letter actually outlined a few immediate sort of early goals. And a lot of that was to get to know people, get to know, it didn't really call out get to know the board, but it said, you know, get to know the staff, get to know donors, get to know important, influential people involved in Jenkins. And I saw it as this was a really important time to get to know. And I was very fortunate. A few board members, especially the ones that were on the hiring committee, they changed over and became a transition committee. And not only were they sort of checking in very friendly, they weren't hovering on me. They just would check in or invite me over to dinner with groups of people and get to meet people in the community. So that was a really nice way, and I really made an attempt to reach out. The board was very, very forward about introducing themselves when they first came on site and talking to them, and I went around sort of round robin calling everybody and setting up meetings with all the board. And I also, one of the first things I did was I started reaching out. I took staff out to lunch, and that was really helpful because I think it broke out that being in the office sort of took us to I had them pick a favorite place to get to know them, and I took everybody out I started with the sort of direct reports, director level, and then worked through the to the student level even. I took them out. So everybody got a chance to have a one-on-one with me, sort of similar to what Bill was sort of experiencing. But it was really helpful as well. Sort of on the business side of it, as I said, my offer letter had a few goals. One board member had created sort of this nice big matrix of things to sort of remember. As many of us, we were following after a very long established leaders. In my case, almost somebody I thought of as an entrepreneur building Jenkins. So, but there was just a lot of, changing names on certain accounts and some more administrative things, but it also gave me a chance to start getting to know some of the other sort of insurance providers and such. And if board members had relationships with those people, they would help introduce me and get connected with. So that was very helpful. As we've been going through the sort of first year of my time here, about 3 months, it was sort of almost that 9-month mark, we sat down and had a review process. And I was actually very surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be. All my board members are business people, but they came forward with a very nice, thoughtful approach of saying what I was really good at, what I needed improved on, and what are the goals to continue on, or what are the next things to sort of accomplish. So, but it was a very open conversation. It wasn't like, here's your thing. It's like, oh, here's what we think. What do you respond to? And part of that review process, they talked to staff and got some perspective from the staff side of what was going on. So it wasn't just board perspective. They got sort of an internal perspective on it as well.
Thank you, Tom. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box and we will come to them as we move through the session. So Tom and Mandy, you are both first-time executive directors, CEOs. How was starting your new job as CEO different than starting a new job as a member of the team, as I'm sure you had done many times before?
I'm going to be completely honest and say I truly underestimated the investment of time that it would take to get up to speed, because I'm not from the horticulture world. So a lot of reading, a lot of visiting other gardens, and chatting with my colleagues at other organizations, taking the time to meet with staff, board, and volunteers who are experts in this area. And that was homework in and of itself. I was also fortunate that my board and staff left a homework pile. So all of the master plans, strategic plans, conversations that board and staff had about envisioning the future, what kinds of projects they would like to work on that they just kept putting on the back burner. All of that was left for me so that I didn't have to chase down files and information and start digging through archives to figure out what's been done already, so I'm not recreating the wheel. But for me, it's just those first 6 months in particular, it just felt like nothing on my to-do list was ever done. I had a list of things I wanted to accomplish, but there was so much that needed to happen in any given day in terms of meetings and appeals and events that I just never felt like I had a moment to sit down and concentrate. So that was my big surprise.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, it was for me, having been in the nonprofit world, I was a director of horticulture in all my other jobs. So it was shifting my head gears, right? It was time to not think about the outside as much. I have a very confident horticulture director and horticulture team. So it was really shifting that new perspective. So it has been sort of similar like Mandy is learning a whole new job perspective of how to approach and get things, look at things a little bit differently. Even though I had been involved in fundraising and some administrative decisions in other organizations as a leader in those organizations, it was shifting sort of full-time thinking on it. And so taking in the resources, the biggest surprise of it all has been working with the board. And I know that sounds crazy. Like I definitely know how that I was going to work with a board, but before I worked with boards, I didn't realize sort of the most intimacy that you develop. And I probably did know that, but it's been an interesting coming into the job. It's like, oh, it's not just the staff I have to win over. I have to win over the board members or sort of another level, a different level than I had to think about before. So that's been interesting and really rewarding because a lot of them are very interested and talented people.
Thank you both. So Bill, when you came to Morris, was there a leadership transition plan in place? Did it work? How was it helpful or not?
Well, Matt, I think honestly the leadership transition at the Morris was very, very well handled, and I was very impressed with the whole way that they did it. The previous director had given a pretty long notice that he was going to be retiring, about a 6-month notice, which gave, I know some people are afraid of giving long notice. You think you're going to be a lame duck, so I commend him for doing that. But that gave the organization time to strategize on a search and define search and hire a search firm and that kind of thing, and also time for to them to assign an interim executive director who was actually functioning as kind of a deputy director at the organization. So it really made my transition very smooth, and they contacted me. We sort of set up plans. When I got my first day at work, my office was all set up and my computer was there and everything. So yes, I think when I think about what are the key things that really work there, I certainly, I encourage people to. I know that people don't like to spend the money on search firms necessarily, but my experience has been nothing but positive working with search firms. They help the organization, I think, frame the transition, and they provide some objectivity, and that it also helps the candidates understand what they're getting into and everything. So that's also very good. And I think for the organization too, having somebody, whether it's somebody that they bring in internally or it's somebody who does this as a sort of interim professional thing, that's really important to move quickly to get somebody in place as an interim so that there's leadership during that transition.
Thank you. Mandy, what did the staff do that helped make your leadership transition successful and also could reflect on the board and donors and others?
I think one of the things that they did particularly well was to organize a comprehensive listening tour for me. So when I arrived, they were the ones that took charge of showing me around to different departments, introducing me to staff, board, and volunteers who had been connected to the organization, which was really helpful. They also accompanied me on some of the visits so that they could give background and help make introductions, which was particularly interesting because I'm meeting hundreds of people all at once and just not having any background or any experience working with them. So it was really helpful to have someone there to kind of gauge those connections and make them for you. Also, they were very good about explaining what had worked in the past and what didn't work. And they were particularly honest, which I appreciated because I don't think there's anything worse than coming into an organization and not feeling like you have all the information at your fingertips and then finding surprises as you come along. So they were very upfront with what they appreciated in past leaders, both in terms of personality, work style, expectations. And so that really set the framework for us to have honest conversations, which continue every single day, and really flip the mindset that for a leader, they were not expecting someone to give them direction. They appreciated having someone who trusted them to have the skill set to put forth ideas, innovations, and really come to me only when there was a problem. So that also freed up some of my time to handle some of those bigger picture projects, which was great.
Thank you. So Bill and Tom, was your organization in the midst of a strategic planning process and/or capital campaign when you arrived? And if so, how did you approach that? Bill, maybe first.
Well, the answer is yes, we're in the middle of a capital campaign. I guess the joke is you're always in a capital campaign these days, but we're basically, I would say, about 2/3 of the way through a capital campaign. But again, I commend the previous director, and he delayed going into more strategic planning or master planning or anything like that. I think realizing that his retirement was looming, and he wanted to leave that for the next director. And I am grateful for that, because I think it's really challenging to come into an organization and inherit somebody else's plan. You know, it's like trying to like edit somebody else's paper. You know, just understanding where it's going, and especially when it comes to fundraising, where you have to really sell the vision. And so, I actually one of my charges was to start in on strategic and master planning. I'm doing kind of a hybrid at this point, and really looking at long-term master plan issues. We haven't had a new plan since the 70s, and so it's a real opportunity to do that. And as far as the capital campaign, I mean, that is a challenge. I think there's no sugarcoating that a director, especially a director who's been with the organization a long time, develops lots of genuine relationships with donors that I can't just walk right in and replace. It takes a long time to get to know people, to have them trust me, to understand what I'm all about, and then throw us into the mix. And the capital campaign is certainly a challenge. I think we'll meet the goal. We are pretty well as far as the capital campaign goal too. But I would say to others out there, if you're listening, you know, if you can avoid doing a transition in the middle of a campaign, I think it's helpful. But obviously, that's very hard, since campaigns seem to go all the time.
Indeed. Tom, any experiences on your side to share?
Yeah, there was already a strategic plan done about a year and a half before I got here. I should just note that the transition, I think, went ahead a little unexpectedly, and it was some all good things, but it just went a little ahead a little unexpectedly. So I came on board. A strategic plan had actually, one of the strategic goals was to hire a new executive director, because again, the organization hadn't done that for almost 30 plus years. And the other piece of that was we were in the middle of a master plan. So I walked into the middle of that, and it was interesting. I sort of absorbed. They were at a really interesting point where they had just collected a bunch of information, and then they were ready to sort of do the idea shaping. And so I came in and really started taking a hold of that. I had just come from an organization where we did a lot of master planning, so it was really nice to be here to sort of do some quick study on what the information gathering had been, and then start looking at what was possible with all the pieces. Which in some ways was really nice, because it allows me to sort of put a little bit of my vision perspective on it. It was a little hard in the sense that it was in the first 2 months I was here, so I was still trying to learn the organization, but it allowed me to sort of work with the staffing and even pull from them and other constituents what they saw, the beauty of what they thought was fun about Jenkins. But what I always say, master plans are about preserving what we really love, but also think about the possibilities of what could be even and reinforcing what's already really beautiful about the place. So I think that was a really good conversation, and I'm looking forward. We're a little delayed in getting that master plan out because of our current circumstances, but I'm really looking forward next year even to start going public with that master plan. And I think that'll be a really nice launch pad to talk about vision and how Jenkins is moving forward in a new future.
Fantastic, thank you. And Mandy, what were some of the pleasant surprises and interesting challenges that you encountered during the transition process?
Wow. So in terms of pleasant surprises, I don't know how many other executive directors or individuals who are thinking about becoming an executive director might feel, but as an introvert, I really struggled over the years to figure out, how do I blend my collaboration style and communication style with the expectation of the role? And after the first couple of months, I just gave up and said, you know what, it's just going to have to be authentic. I have to be myself. So no, I'm not a big talker. I am a great listener, and I think that has been looked at as an asset, especially talking to donors and some of our supporters, but also figuring out that it's okay to connect with people on a deeper level, but recognizing that that takes time. I am not the kind of person that you throw out into a gala and say, go chit chat with 500 people. That's just not how I work. So I think the staff have now recognized, okay, so we're going to tell you the top 10 people maybe you want to mingle with or pay attention to, or if you need more time to process information, that's okay. Give me a week's heads up that you need a decision about a project so that I have time to really mull it over, ask questions, do some more research, and then come back to you what I think is the most appropriate recommendation, as opposed to making decisions on the fly. It doesn't mean that I haven't been put on the spot and had to do that, but I just feel more comfortable having more time to make those kinds of decisions. So I think the board has come to recognize that I'm great at communicating via email, and so they appreciate having weekly briefings from me so that they know what's going on, but don't necessarily have to pick up the phone or stop by. If they're here, that's great, they can chat, but recognizing that my pace is just a little different, but still effective. So if there are any introverts out there who have any doubt about being able to step into a role like this and do it well, trust your gut.
Thank you. So to move towards closing, I wondered if each of you could share a valuable lesson, piece of advice, or a book that helped you survive your first year on the job and that you would recommend to anybody in the audience who is in a transition or thinking about taking on a leadership role.
I early on, even before I started this job, Stephanie Julia at Greater Des Moines Botanic Garden recommended this book. I don't know if it's going to look backwards and mirrored, but it's called The Boards That Make a Difference. And so it's a great reference. She always said she had a couple copies on the shelf, and when she was working with a new board member, or they had a question about board dynamic with staff or herself, they'd pull this book off and use it like a reference book. So I have this. I've actually passed it on to another colleague who runs a museum nearby. And so that's been a nice book. And it's something I did recently. As I mentioned earlier, it's always great to know people, and we're all always trying to figure out our staff and how they tick and how they sort of process information, and they're trying to learn how I tick and process information and make decisions. I've been working with an HR consultant who recently introduced me to the DISC system, DISK. That's an acronym that stands for a variety of sort of not quite personality types, but work style types. And that's been an interesting process as well. So if you're looking at it, it can be I haven't done it with my staff. I think I'm going to do it with my staff as part of getting to know our styles and improving our team efforts. And it can be a really nice way of learning a little bit about yourself, but also how you can read others and interact with others.
Thank you. Bill or Mandy?
I can share that in my first visit with Mite Ray at Bartram's Garden, she gave me the best advice that has served me to this day. She said, if you want to have time to concentrate, don't come into the office. Work at home, work at a Starbucks, go anywhere other than the office, because the constant interruptions, the emails, the phones ringing, that's going to take away time, and you're just never going to finish your project. So I have to personally give her a shout out for saving me. Thank you, Mite Ray.
Love it. Thank you, Mandy. And Bill?
Yeah, we've had a lot of that time lately, which has been very productive in some ways. I think, first of all, if you're thinking about a leadership position in the public garden, we need you. There's certainly a need for the next generation of leaders. I think leadership is different than management, and you have to really think about how you're going to set the vision for the organization, how you're going to inspire your staff. Coming in as a new leader of an organization, I think there's an expectation, as Matt talked about in the beginning, that you're coming in as an agent of change. There's going to be a lot of changes. And I tried when I came in to say, all right, well, I'm going to just try to listen for the first year and not make a lot of changes, which can be kind of difficult sometimes, where you see things that you'd like to, that you think you have a better solution for. But I feel like trying to hold back and just listen and learn, now that I've gone through my first year, I think the changes that I'm putting into place are changes that I'll have the buy-in of my staff, the trust of the university, much more than if I'd kind of come in and made changes right away.
Thank you very much. So sort of lightning round, just simple yes or no. Would each of you be willing to be a resource or an ear to a new leader or somebody who's trying to figure out whether they should take on this task?
Absolutely.
All right. Bill?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tom?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. And I'll just underscore what Bill said, which is we need a great crop of leaders constantly rising and taking over from us and others and leading this incredible community of public gardens and arboretums and institutions forward. So if we can be a resource, please know that's a sincere invitation. Reach out, use APGA, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, panelists, please turn your cameras and mics on. So we got a bunch of terrific questions from the attendees. Thank you for chipping in. So first one is, and Mandy, I thought you might have thoughts here, but Tom as well. How did the board help make this leadership transition really successful, or what do you wish they had done? Any thoughts on board support?
Sure. Well, I guess I was at a slight advantage. Our board chair served as interim ED before my arrival. So I think she had an appreciation for how challenging and demanding the role can be, and what kind of skill sets were needed. And so I think from day one, just being super accommodating as to the type of schedule we needed, the types of changes we were trying to make, and talking almost on a weekly basis, be it about work or not, but just staying in frequent communication and just sharing ideas and experiences to figure out how we could grow together. It wasn't solely about having staff support, it's about having staff and board support to ensure your success as an ED. So I'm grateful I had that.
Thank you. Tom or Bill, anything to add there?
I was just going to say that it was really interesting when I came on board. The board members took sort of full responsibility of the hiring process. There was no, they didn't hire a firm to help with the process. So I think they were very intimate in figuring out the process. But also I had a lot of past board members who reached out to me. So I got a really nice scope of history on the place and from their perspective, which was really helpful. So a very nice committed group of people here that were involved and still are involved. And we have a lot of past board members who want to be board members again. So it's a really nice continuation. We do also look for new people to bring in, just as an added note. But it was a nice transition in that communication style.
All right, so there's a question about transitions in the leadership team. Did you experience turnover in your first year? This would be your direct reports and others. And how did you manage that and keep things going? Anybody want to take that?
I think I brought that up in my in the questions, Matt. Well, we didn't have luckily any transitions that, for any terrible reasons. We've had some transitions due to retirement, and I think that again, it's expected. I would expect during a leadership transition that there would be other staff transitions too. It's just sort of a time people rethink and take it as an opportunity. So I would expect it, and I look at it as an opportunity, I think, to reshape my team. And in our case, we're looking at splitting one department into two and promoting a couple other people from within. So it can be very positive. But in both of my leadership transitions, there's been, senior turnover during the first year.
Can I answer that question, Matt? Because I have
Go for it. Thank you.
A unique experience. I think I intentionally came in with the expectation not to make any changes to staffing, either at the leadership level or not. And it worked out quite well. To date, only one person is no longer part of the senior management team, which I think is phenomenal. But at the same time, I also had the opportunity to elevate several individuals to higher level positions so that they could join senior management and have a seat at the table, which I think has helped to change the dynamic for how we make decisions, how we plan for events and appeals. And it's really been a nice welcome change.
could we build on that? So there was a question about how our thoughts on promoting leadership internally versus searching externally. Mandy, you talked a bit about trying to move people up in the organization. How have you gone about that, identifying and supporting people to make that transition? And Bill or Tom, feel free to chip in as well.
Sure. I took the time the first 6 months just to evaluate what everyone's role was, how long they had served in it, what their strengths were, and to have those one-on-one conversations early on about what they enjoy doing versus what they're actually doing, and trying to match up their skill sets with either creating a different role or expanding their existing role so that there was some diversity and interest in what they were doing each and every day. And that process continues. We are looking at every single department to make similar changes in the next 6 months.
I actually was, in my previous job at the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens, I was internally promoted into the CEO position from the Director of Horticulture. So I can, I know what that's like. I think there's definitely pros and cons to it. I came knowing a lot about the internal machinations of the organization, the politics, the people. So my sort of learning curve in some ways was shorter. But I think there's no question when you come as part of an external search, you come with a sort of a mandate that it's a little harder to get when you're promoted internally. And then the other real risk is if you apply for a director job, CEO job, for example, from within the organization, and then you don't get the job, it puts you in a sort of a tenuous position of, do I stay in the organization, do I not? So it worked out well for me, but I would say it's not that I'm discouraging people to take the opportunity, but I think you have to do it if you're thinking about it, knowing that you may be thinking that you might have to leave the organization if it doesn't work out.
And I'm just going to say, I think there's two ways as we all develop our careers. You can stay within an organization and build up, and I think there's a lot of value in that. At Jenkins, we have a lot of people who have been previously students who have built up a majority of the staff, actually, in many sense. And then I think there's also value when you bring in new people, because they bring in new perspectives and new direction and ideas to an organization. So, both has its value. I'm a product of moving around and being a new person in an organization, but I think there's also a lot of value when you can promote within an organization and see somebody grow in that organization and further the ideas and goals of that, values of that organization.
Thank you. So maybe time for two more questions. Any tips on addressing fear of change? So you come in as a new leader, you've got an organization. We talked a lot about how to learn about it, but just head on addressing fear of change. Any thoughts or experiences to share?
I think there's always that hesitation when somebody new comes in. What are they going to do? How are they going to alter everything? And we've all talked about listening and communicating and learning as part of an important part of the step and process of this. And the first Longwood Fellows work they did talks a lot about that, about transition leadership, and they talk a lot about how you evaluate and talk to people. And but I think there is always a lot of fear, and I think it's how do you create that open communication with your staff? And I think, unfortunately, that fear has even been ramped up with our current circumstances as we look at our organizations, right? And working now, I never expected I would take a job and all of a sudden be working remotely with staff, and it changes your communication style, right? You're not seeing them face to face, you're not reading body language, and then also everybody's dealing with their levels of stresses, personal and professional, so in different ways. So it is, how do you manage that, and how do you manage an organization and move it forward, especially as all three of us have dealt with long leaders, so there wasn't a lot of big change, and those leaders were very honed in what they wanted to do and their direction. But then how do you deal with transition and all that? It's tough, but I think it's just good communication and not just dump things on people at an instant.
Terrific, thank you. Couple questions about sort of learning from predecessors. So I know in my own job, I've had a good fortune to sort of interact with people who have held my role previously and learn from them. One person asked about exit interviews with the predecessors. Other asked any insights there on how that can be helpful and managed well.
I think I'm fortunate that my predecessor lives, just about a half a mile away from the Arboretum. He's still an ex officio member of the advisory board and a great supporter for the organization. So I try to just reach out with by email with questions in a respectful way. I don't want to impinge on his retirement, but I think there's certain things that nobody else knows the answer to, and he's been very, very kind, and I think appreciates the fact that that I'm reaching out and keeping him in the loop. And I also just try to because he's so invested in the organization, just keep him apprised of things that are going on too, and so it's really a win-win, I think, for both of us.
And I was just going to say, I've been fortunate as well. My predecessor retired as well, so every once in a while I'll be able to touch base and review topics and information. So that's been helpful.
Terrific. All right, so two asks of the panelists before we wrap up. One is, please type your email address if you're willing to take further questions or dialogue in the chat. And the participants also asked that we type the name of the books we recommended in the chat. So if you have any to recommend, do that. And with that, I really just want to thank all of the panelists for being with us and all the participants. It's been a great discussion, and turn it over to Sarah Beck from APGA to close us out. Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was a really excellent session. And I also want to remind you all that the discussion platform on the annual conference site is also available for continued discussion. So you're welcome to take some of these conversations there. If there were any unanswered questions, the panelists are welcome to continue that conversation going. I would also like to thank Kittleman and Associates for sponsoring the Leadership, Innovation, and Advocacy track today, and also for everyone who's contributed. We have a reminder that there is a CFRE continuing education credit available for this session. It is 3/4 of an hour, 0.75 CEUs, and that is really the end of sessions for today. Thank you again. I hope everyone's going to join us on Thursday when we wrap up this virtual annual conference. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks all for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Be well.
Take care.
Thank you all. Take care. Be well.
Take care.